Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Tim Keevil from Fukoku Life. Just a question, how do you fix a balance of payments problem, something like the UK? Obviously, the UK has been topping up its balance with things like massive real estate sales abroad to places like Russia, China, and the Middle East over the last few years, using FDI to balance up capital imbalances, and etc. But these all seem like short-term fixes. How do you fix up this twin deficit?
Audrey, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, so I think structurally, the problem of the UK balance of payments from a currency perspective wasn't a driver. And it didn't drive the currency market. And sterling could very comfortably live with an external imbalance. What I'm saying is that at this point, the risk is that if appetite for UK assets start to go down, the current account position will get even worse, will deteriorate further, and then it will become a driver for the market. In terms of fixing the balance of payments imbalances, trying to attract more inflows in the country, credibility, competitiveness, greater productivity. I mean, these are all things that I think are long-term structural problems that the UK economy has to address, and the long-term structural challenges for the UK economy.
Yeah, and just from Dan's work that I've seen on the UK, it's the depreciation itself, of course, helps quite a lot, doesn't it? In the sense that it makes revalues the assets on your balance sheet, makes you look like a safer bet, and so that's partly what we're seeing now, I guess, is exchange rate depreciating as a result of this risk off. Any other questions in the audience? Yeah, another at the back on the left there.
Thank you. Where do you see the renminbi heading over the next few years?
Do you want to take it, or shall I can?
Well, just have a
share.
go.
I can share.
Maybe Tom will.
Tom can say something.
Yeah.
Please go on. Set up.
I'm just going to grab the floor again as the resident China expert. So, if we go back a few years, a yuan depreciation would be considered a kind of panic signal for the Chinese economy. Remember in 2015, 2016, when there was that mini yuan devaluation engineered by the PBOC, and it was a trigger for hundreds of billions of dollars in capital outflows, and everyone thought perhaps the end was nigh. So what's happened since then is that the PBOC has actually engineered some fairly sophisticated reforms in the way their monetary policy and exchange rate operate. And that's left them in a much better place. It's left them in a place where the exchange rate is more flexible, and they can use yuan depreciation to support the economy, to drive a bit more export competitiveness at a time of weakness. So that's what's happening now. I think the yuan is already close to 7 to the dollar. I expect it to go through that barrier. More yuan weakness supporting more export competitiveness, providing a little bit of an offset to the weakness that we see in Chinese real estate and because of the China COVID lockdowns. But I also think the PBOC wants that yuan depreciation to happen at a managed pace. So we'll see continued interventions from the PBOC using their daily fixing, using tools like the reserve requirement ratio on FX deposits in China to make sure the depreciation takes place in a controlled, not a catastrophic way.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for the last-minute save. So I think we're actually very nearly out of time. So I think it just stands to me to thank you all again for attending, and we'll pass on to whether central banks are broken or not after that. So another cheerful conversation.
Thank you very much, Jamie. So we've had a lot of, I think, really interesting observations that have been generally about the next year or so, in some cases the next week or so, when it comes to the UK. But as this title suggests, we also thought it was worth sort of stepping back. There's been, one of the themes that's sort of percolating beneath these more sort of short-term conjunctural conversations is whether we are in a different era for macroeconomic policy, for inflation, for interest rates, and what the implications for central banks would be if we were in such an era. So this is why we've brought David Wilcox over from his normal home in Washington. I was delighted we were able to tempt him to Bloomberg Economics. We had first met each other working together, him in a much more senior position, I should say, at the US Treasury in the late 90s.